I run a small team to explore any emerging technology and its impact on the fashion and retail industry. For me, the metaverse is a 3D version of the internet. You could put on a pair of AR glasses or raise up your mobile phone and begin to interact with the world. The real world will become clickable. I want to see is something that looks different to the everyday. If you build something which is a shopping mall within VR, I'm slightly disappointed. The industry has always been about evoking an emotional reaction. If you can use the technology to draw that wow moment out of a consumer, out of an executive, then you'll be in a much better place to get the industry to move a little quicker. Customers are really accepting of experimentation, a lot more so than fashion brands. We live our lives in a state of perpetual beta testing. Nothing is perfect, and yet fashion brands want to pack everything into a sense of perfection and deliver you that singular message. You're going to need leaders to be brave, and they're going to need to trust a generation. That will be the single biggest driver to those brands that can pivot more quickly. We have the opportunity to build these really amazing experiences where you lifted off your VR headset and went, I'm back in the real world.
Welcome to Anatomy of a Leader, a video podcast that shows you that there are many faces of leadership, that perfection doesn't and shouldn't exist, and that making mistakes or taking detours can often lead to deep insights about your superpowers. My name is Maria Vorostovsky. I'm a headhunter and founder of HVO Search, and I help ambitious leaders hire the most in-demand, high-potential C-suite talent. Each week, let me take you on a journey to discover what leadership truly is and how you too can get to the very top. And in the meantime, help us reach 1,000 subscribers, hit that red subscribe button below and the bell icon so you don't miss a single episode. This show will challenge the way you think and may even change your life. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get you on for some time.
Yep.
I'm very busy traveling.
Yep. Travel has been back, which has been really lovely to be back out and about, but it's great to be here.
Yes, nice to see you. I know we've had some Zoom conversations at the start of the pandemic.
Yep.
And lots of Clubhouse talks as well.
Good old Clubhouse, remember that?
I know. It's like distant memory now.
Yeah. Lockdown memories.
Lockdown memories, indeed. Well, nice to see you face to face. You are the head of innovation agency at the London College of Fashion.
That's right.
What does head of innovation agency do exactly?
So I run a small team which has this beautiful remit from the college to explore any emerging technology and its impact on the fashion and retail industries. So what we try to do is build proof of concept with that technology. And we shape our work into three main areas: how we can use that technology to change the way that designers make their collections, how they show their collections, and ultimately how they retail their collections. And so it's really kind of looking at a very traditional fashion design and business model, creating and showcasing where technology can change that, showing it to the industry, trying to accelerate the pace of change within the fashion industry, and then bringing back all of that knowledge into the university to kind of send out another generation of designers with a far greater understanding of emerging technologies. So it's a lot of fun. We effectively get to play with technology every day and make fun stuff.
Sounds very interesting, and no day is the same.
That is very true. And, we're into kind of appraisal season with the team, and we always get to look back on what's happened across the year. And every single year is the same, is that it's very difficult to predict exactly what we'll be doing in the year ahead. But when we come back to look back at what we've done, and this is our 9th year that we've been doing it, it's always full of incredible projects where we've kind of pushed the boundaries of where technology meets fashion and demonstrated what's really possible. And that remit allows for us to kind of look 3 to 5 years in advance of proper commercialization. So we're really pushing at the bleeding edge of where the technology can go. So it is really hard to kind of assess what we might be doing 12 months down the road, but we certainly know it's always exciting, which is a really fun place to be.
I'd love to come back to this idea of fashion and technology blending and how sort of the intersection of that. But before we do that, I'm just curious how you got into this industry. I mean, how did you get into fashion tech?
So from a very young age, I was always an ardent gamer. So I would spend probably far too much time on my computers and consoles, as my parents would attest. Alongside that, I was very fortunate to kind of stumble into roles where innovation was important. So I've always been working within fashion retail in innovation roles. And a large chunk of that was spent in the Far East in Japan. So I lived and worked in Japan for 10, 11 years, and it was an amazing place to be exposed to emerging technology, where it's placed and how to alter consumer experience using technology. So in the early days, that might have been looking within a retail store about how we could monitor how people were moving around in the store, and could we begin to influence that journey, to kind of the early adoption of internet shopping and where we could begin to influence consumers through that. So I was very lucky to be able to be exposed in a society that was open to technology, where it was very forward thinking, and to apply it in a field that was relevant to what I was doing. And over the years, those skill sets were quite unusual, and the work that we were doing was always brushing up against fashion. And it's a relatively small world, the fashion technology world. So people tend to hear about what you're doing. So I got offered the position in 2013 and given this blank sheet of paper at the college just to do whatever I wanted, really, which was exciting.
So what is that?
So that role is really to advance change. Mm-hmm. And I think I recognized very early on that technology was going to be a major driver over the next 10 years or so. And I think what I wanted to begin to show was how to do it in a way that the industry would understand. We really needed to build proof of concepts and experiences that showcased technology at its most beautiful with fashion in a way that would resonate with luxury brands. And I don't know if anyone has ever kind of been to my talks and seen the work that we deliver. Even the way that we present it is done in a way which is almost cinematic in its quality. So I think it was an idea of keeping that very high end so the luxury would understand it, and then using the ripple down effect for the rest of the industry to begin to get excited by what we were doing. It certainly took a while to begin to bed in, but 9 years later, I think there's a genuine acceptance that the role that we have at the university is incredibly important. And because we're at a university, we have some freedom to be a little bit more honest about where the technologies are going, which I think makes us a kind of trusted mentor to the industry.
You mentioned that there is this drive for change, and obviously the fashion tech industry is really small. Who is driving the change? Is it the fashion companies or is it technology companies?
It's a really good question, because I think and the simple answer is it's a combination of things. Ultimately, it's technology which is shaping culture and society and consumer behavior. And that use of technology is allowing a new narrative to be developed in a new way for fashion brands to begin to talk to and communicate with that consumer. That is something that luxury brands always felt a little bit distant from, and felt that they could control the conversation, that things would always be as they were and that they would have that narrative. Technology has shifted to a point where we can begin to place consumers directly into the world of a brand and begin to change the relationship between brand and consumer, where the consumer feels a lot more part of that. So I think I would say largely it's technology, but it's also consumers using that technology and brands beginning to realize that things are changing. We need to begin to move as well.
With fashion being so traditional and technologies companies wanting to come and disrupt the way that it's working, what are the main problems that these emerging technologies are trying to solve within the fashion space?
So, I mean, I think there are a lot of really simple applications for technology to change the industry, from artificial intelligence being used for prediction and sell-through. There's a lot of 3D design tools that could save an awful lot of wastage in supply chain. All of these things are really simple and very easy to be applied. We have kind of demonstrated that from as early on as sort of 2014, 2015. But also, I think it's an interesting question, because I often say to the team, we're not there to solve a problem. We need to go beyond what exists today. We need to think about what's coming tomorrow. And that is, solving a problem today is great, but it means you're only looking at what's directly in front of you. And the technologies that we're working with will allow for, I think, a very different kind of experience in a completely new industry. So, yeah, there are lots of people working on technology that can be applied directly today. What we want to do with our remit is look a little bit further afield. So, I don't know, a lot of what we were working on 3, 4, 5 years ago is a lot more commonplace now. And I think it's to be that almost guiding light for the industry to say, this is coming. This is where you need to align skill sets. This is going to be possible. You need to take it seriously. Which 5 years ago, I think, was a harder message to sell. It's become, because of what's happened over the last couple of years, it's become a lot easier to get people to respond to that message.
So in terms of the future, are you seeing any patterns, or what is coming?
So what is coming is a really big shift from the industry being predominantly working in 2D to shifting in 3D, from, sketching on a piece of paper and working off those into a complete 3D world. And I think this shift, both in how we create, how we communicate, and how we retail product, is changing. And that is where I think you're going to require a massive change across every element of the industry, from the designers who make product to the marketers who want to push it out there, and the teams in e-com who are pushing predominantly 2D experiences to creating something which is very different and feels very different. Being placed within a 3D environment for consumers can put you in the heart of a brand story. So I don't know, I always use the analogy that what's coming is going to allow us to either pull the content that's in our monitors directly out into the world around us, or pull us straight through that screen directly into the world that you see. So we're no longer just having that very flat experience. It's something that can be all around us.
Who are the fashion companies that are embracing this more? Because this industry is very traditional, very risk averse when it comes to learning from other industries. But there's definitely a desire and a want to stay ahead of the curve. Who are the trailblazers that are really taking this seriously?
So there aren't many, and it's taken a while, but there are certainly some who are a lot more active than others. And I would look at Gucci and Burberry and Balenciaga as being ones who have embraced a lot of those things a lot earlier than others. But I tend to look not just at what the marketing teams are doing, but what is the infrastructure of the business? Because you need to be embedding within your team 3D designers, CG teams, visual effects teams. These are things and skill sets which don't always necessarily sit within fashion brands, but a number of those are beginning to do that. And I think we'll see a big shift in the type of hire within businesses in the future. And it will need to happen, because this is the direction of travel for the industry. And we will move away from these flat experiences, both through e-com and through all of the other mediums that we've currently had, into something which feels a lot more immersive.
So in terms of the skills, you're talking about getting people internally. Is it that everyone should now be hiring people that are used to doing 3D design, or is it broader than that?
Yeah, so I think what we do at the college is look at where are these skill sets. So from the School of Design and Technology, yes, 3D design is important. So we want to see a lot more students working in Clo and Browseware and all of the other 3D design tools. They then need to have 3D animation skills. So software like Maya and Blender are going to be very important. And then ultimately game engines like Unity and Unreal are important. To imagine that those skills sit in one person alone is probably what the industry thinks at the moment. They don't, and you're going to need people with those skill sets that specialize in those areas. So it's going to be broad, and it will require 3D designers, but it will also need all of the other teams. And when I think at the college, like our fashion business school, maybe the students aren't engaging directly with that technology, but they have to understand what that technology does and what the implications are, so that when they're going into positions, whether that be marketing or econ, whatever it might be, that those future executives can make a much better decision and reasoning based on the technology than perhaps a current crop do.
I mean, I get that all the time. Clients always want this mix of impossible things together,
because that's a lack of understanding of the technology and what's possible. And I think from the very top of every organization, we need to see a new generation that understand how to build within those technologies, but they are going to have to understand what they do and what the meaning is for their business. Because 5 or 6 years ago, the idea of digital experiences was probably limited to an e-commerce experience. And that just sat, digital meant e-com, but it's a lot broader than that. And I think will be its own channel. So, but it will obviously have implications across all of the industry as well. So we need people in place who have an understanding of that.
So this brings me to the question, what should current leaders, particularly within companies which are not as open to it, like the Balenciaga, Gucci's of Burberry's of this world, what must the leaders do, or how should they shift their mindset to be open to these new technologies and new ideas? How can they see the light that it's required to have these people on board?
How do they see the light? I think we've worked with luxury brands over a long period of time and have seen so many excuses as to why they shouldn't be investing in new technologies. And every reason under the sun has been given for not doing that. Fear of being first, fear of being second, fear of failure, fear of cost, all of those things, but ultimately all driven by fear. So you're going to need leaders to be brave, and they're going to need to trust a generation that has an understanding of that technology and will have a very different viewpoint. They'll be a lot younger, and they'll be talking about things that perhaps they don't understand. And that belief in another generation will be the single biggest driver to those brands that can pivot more quickly and can begin to take this opportunity. I work at the university, and I see so much talent coming through that their expectations of work are different. The way in which they're using the tools that we give to them is different. They will build entirely different businesses. That will be scary for many executives, but those that give them the space to breathe, the opportunity, that give them a voice, will be the most successful.
I mean, change is terrifying, especially when you don't understand it.
Yeah, and we see it very clearly. And we've been doing this for a long time, and I always go back to maybe the last talk that I gave in public prior to COVID arriving, and it was just literally weeks before COVID really kicked in. It was at the end of February in 2020. I was in Los Angeles speaking to a group of luxury fashion executives about virtual product, virtual fashion shows. And they thought it was cool, but I could see the raised eyebrows. I could see this is cool, but maybe one day, Matt. And then the world collapsed, and they had to close their stores. They couldn't have their physical catwalk shows. And suddenly they were hearing about how kids were connecting on Fortnite and Roblox. and were living their lives through a virtual space. And actually they themselves, those executives, were suddenly forced onto Zoom calls and Google Meet and every teleconferencing platform that was available. So I think that fear has always been there. It's always present, this kind of stepping into the unknown. But I think it's something that is beginning to change, but it's gonna require a leap for some of those guys to really move forward.
I love what you said about supporting the young talent and really beginning to pay attention. Apart from, as you said, giving them a voice and listening, how else can young talent be supported within this space?
So I think one of the things that is most exciting is that actually they can do it themselves, and they will. And this will be the big challenge for leaders within the fashion industry, is they can either give them that opportunity within the business to help them build the future of what luxury looks like, or they'll go do it themselves. We are going to see a complete shift in power structure within the industry where, prior to what we're seeing with Web 2 and Web 3 is the ability for designers to go completely to consumers, to begin to build a viable business where their digital worth will be recognized alongside physical product if that's what they want to create as well. But they will be able to build very big businesses. And I kind of look back to the 2020 and lockdown moments of being this point at which, and I think we might have said on previous podcasts that we've done together or conferences, that we will look back on this moment and look at the businesses that were born out of this time. And I often think back to that moment when Artifact were acquired by Nike. This is a very young business, a few guys with a good idea, some really cool execution, and they're selling hundreds of millions of dollars worth of product. And, this wasn't that possible 10 years ago. It's very possible now, and we will see more of them. Artifact weren't the first and they won't be the last. There'll be a lot more.
Mm. What are the cool emerging technologies you're seeing now?
So for us, it's kind of a roadmap of technologies. So we're super interested in everything 3D. And what we're trying to do at the college is build a pipeline. So to be really specific, we're looking at photogrammetry, which is the ability for us to use a huge camera rig to capture individuals or artifact in 3D. Also volumetric capture, which is 3D video. And then all of that pipeline through to virtual production. So we're looking at motion capture, green screen, and shooting against huge LED volumes as well. So it's really a pipeline of, if you're going to create 3D assets, either you're working natively within 3D to do that, or if you're taking physical products and you want to place that into a 3D world, that we can scan it using the tools that we have and place those into a digital world. So it's making sure that we have all of those options, and you'll be able to see it through augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality. So those are kind of the endpoints for which that content creation will live.
Mm-hmm. Talking about the emerging technologies, what should either the tech founders or people within that space that are really working on creating new, interesting technologies for the fashion industry, what must they know about the fashion industry?
They will need to know that the fashion industry is slow to move, and particularly if they're looking to work alongside the fashion industry, that it can be hesitant and it can be a little bit scared about taking that first jump. But I think also what you need to deliver is something that will speak to the industry. It needs to understand that the industry has always been about emotion, about evoking an emotional reaction. So if you can use the technology to draw that wow moment out of a consumer, out of an executive, then you will be in a really good position. And I think ultimately that's what you want it to do each and every time that you do it, is that whatever we try and make is that point at which people's breath is taken away, that the heartbeat is raised slightly. If you're creating a catwalk experience or a virtual show experience, that you're your heart rate should elevate in the way that it does when you're sat at front row, that physical excitement of being at a show, or if you're browsing for a product, that you see something that you love, that you fall in love with it. That's not a rational decision. That's an emotional decision. Use technology to drive those emotional responses, then you'll be in a much better place to get the industry to move a little quicker.
It's that case of technology to enhance the experience or to take away a problem, or to solve something that's not working. But ultimately you need to understand the human principles behind that and how the human being works, and to be able to kind of enhance that space. And for sure, I mean, fashion is about emotion. It's not a rational thing. I mean, if it was, we wouldn't be spending so much money and having closets full of things that don't necessarily get worn all that frequently. And actually on that point, in terms of sustainability, I feel like that's a space where innovation and emerging technologies can solve a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work around digital clothing. And I guess one of those early briefs of digital clothing, or early hopes of what digital clothing would be that it would be a way to kind of challenge the behavior of buying something physical and throwing it away. I think 1 in 10 UK shoppers will admit to buying something that they will use just to take a photo on Instagram and then throw it away afterwards. So if that's 1 in 10 admitting it, it's probably a lot more than that. And ultimately, I think we recognize that, and I think the whole industry realizes it's an uncomfortable conversation, that we are creating too much physical product. Mm-hmm. We are consuming too much physical product. We have to challenge this behavior. Can digital fashion offer an alternative to that? And I think it can. It won't solve the whole problem, but it is one way of which, if you were going to buy something on Insta just to take a photo and post it, we can do that digitally, and we can do it pretty credibly. Mm. So there is a way in which we could do that. I also think there's another side to that coin, where if it becomes possible to simply download digital clothing to your avatar, and at the touch of a button you can change what you're wearing, do you begin to fuel an entirely new wave of consumerism? We don't know yet, and I think the tools are not there, and the usage isn't at the levels to begin to test that. But I think on a positive note, that these technologies can definitely begin to challenge the behavior of consumers that we see at the moment.
Mm. So we're talking a lot about digital fashion, which leads me to talk about the metaverse. What is it, and why should we care?
So there will be a lot of different versions of what people believe the metaverse to me will be. For me, the metaverse is a 3D version of the internet. This is something that will be persistent. It will be all around us. It will be device agnostic, so we can access it through a mobile phone, a tablet, a pair of VR goggles. There are going to be lots of ways that we can access it, but fundamentally, this is the 3D version of the internet.
So when you say there's going to be variations of it, is there going to be just the one, or is it several?
So if you're looking for a pure description of the metaverse, it can only be one. This is one. There is only one internet. There'll be lots of platforms within that exist, but for me, it's one consolidated, connected world that we can pass through and have different experiences in. But ultimately, this is all 3D led and will look and feel very different. So a good example would be something that you could put a VR headset on, pop that on, begin to go shopping within that world in presumably and hopefully a shopping center that looks dramatically different to a real life one. But also you could walk out of your front door and there is a digital layer to the physical world, something that you can interact with. You might not notice it as you walk out of your front door, but you could put on a pair of AR glasses or raise up your mobile phone and begin to interact with the world and effectively make the world clickable. The real world will become clickable.
You're describing it in such a way where you're leaving the house, you can switch it on and off if you don't want to be participating, but it's permeating every single layer of your life. Does that mean that with the internet not necessarily belonging to anyone, but there's clearly players who are dominating the space, is that the same for the metaverse?
There's a lot of discussion around who will control the metaverse, and obviously a lot of fear that the big technology companies that emerged out of the rise of Web 2 will become present and look to stake their claim. Look, I think I would say that there is a lot of desire for this to remain an open platform. The Open Metaverse Council was formed relatively recently that includes most of those big players. And there is a desire to make sure the tools are open and free to everybody. I think with every shift in technology, it's almost inevitable that we see new companies emerge out of that, like Facebook and Google emerged out of the rise of the internet, that we will see something similar come out of this metaverse space. So
is it the likes of Sandbox, Decentraland, or is it something completely different?
I mean, I think it will be something different. Those spaces that exist at the moment for you to go and visit are interesting and fun, but I think are just early iterations of what the metaverse could look like. And actually, I think away from those, the metaverse is much more likely to be more like Roblox or Fortnite, where you currently have, 200, 300 million active monthly users, as opposed to the mainly, how many a day on Decentraland and Sandbox? Less than 1,000. So I think you will always look at where is the consumer going to go? What is the opportunity to build around those blocks? But ultimately, I don't know if you talked about Meta, but I think Unity and Epic Games, who have the Unreal Engine, are much more fundamental to what the building blocks of a 3D internet would look like.
What do you want to see in the metaverse personally?
What I want to see is something that looks different to the everyday. And I think there's been a lot of focus on fully virtual experiences, which will be a part of the metaverse, as well as the physical ones that I mentioned earlier. What I want to see is creatives taking us to a place where, look, if we're building within virtual spaces, you can remove the limits of physicality, you can create the extraordinary. And I think you have to be aspirational in these experiences. If you build something which is a shopping mall within VR, I'm slightly disappointed. I don't really like going to shopping malls in the physical world, let alone doing that in VR. Let's build things which are, like I mentioned earlier, that are emotionally exciting, that are that wow moment. And I think the tools that we have will allow us to do that will make you feel part of something.
It's like you step out of your home and you enter strange, what is the show called?
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things.
The upside down. You could step into that. And I think that narrative storytelling that's always been important to brands has always been quite linear from brand to you to consumer. But now you can be part of that story and feel part of what you're doing. And I think that will be a big, big shift. So it's really that, it's to have these experiences which feel like you want to be in them. I always go back to one of my formative VR experiences, which was a Star Wars experience that we did actually at a shopping centre at Westfield. But I did it with the team. There were 4 of us within it. And it was so realistic. And because it was a location-based experiences, they could adjust the heating and the scent around you. So you could actually smell like the lava in this one particular area and the heat from it. And it was that one moment where you lifted off your VR headset and went, I'm back in the real world. That we have the opportunity to build these really amazing experiences that people will want to go into.
Is there a danger to that though? I mean, if you get so excited by being in this fantasy world, which is exciting and beautiful and perfect, and then have that experience like, oh no, I'm back to my real world.
It reminds me when I was a kid, I used to love to go to the arcades because I could play games at arcades that my computer was never capable of playing. And effectively, that's what we'll do. I think people have always been scared about how much time we'll spend watching TV, listening to the radio, playing video games. That has never come to pass. This will be additional to our lives and should enhance what we do. And ultimately, for also the physical world, we'll be able to enhance our experience in the real world through these digital experiences too. So I think about spaces like the Outernet at Tottenham Court Road, these huge LED screens, which will encompass almost an entire district of central London, that will allow us to really redefine what physical experiences look like as well, and how we interact with digital content, almost changing the city into this digital canvas. So I think what's important to understand is that digital experiences are going to form a huge part of our lives in the year ahead, both in the physical world that we exist, but also virtual worlds that we inhabit too. And that is something which should excite people, because I think done well, it should add a lot of value. And particularly for physical spaces, like we need a reason to get people out of their homes again, to push them back to physical retail, to show them how exciting it can be. And we've got tools that can make it amazing.
Retail has become so dull for so long.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it for ages. And
Yeah.
then as a result of the pandemic, it's like when people are not going to the stores and now realizing just how boring it has been to go into the stores. And everyone's craving that experience again, to go somewhere, to leave their house. But what, to just buy another shirt or another dress or another pair of trousers? I feel like as a result of the pandemic, we're really missing those social experiences.
I think it's been really clear that even pre-pandemic, the retail needed to shift, needed to change, and give people a reason to get out of their homes and go to that physical space. I think experiential is a term that was thrown about by retailers for such a long time. And
Retail theatre.
and Selfridge as being one of the really good proponents of that from the early days. For many retailers, experiential was opening a coffee shop in your store. I think
To start.
that's fine. I think it's a long way from what the technology will enable us to do. And like when the Outernet opens very shortly, I think it will be a glimpse of what the future can be like, because I came back from Korea recently, and these huge 3D anamorphic screens that are everywhere across the city give a sense of depth to experience that wasn't possible before. And we will see those technologies, those screens are becoming cheaper month by month. That they will form a big part of what experiential looks like. And we're only just scratching the surface of what kinds of experiences we can build with them. But they will be amazing and will change what we think about. And, you know, your point of just going to a store to buy another shirt, you could do that anywhere, anytime.
You don't even need to go into the store to do it.
We have no need to go to a store to do that. And also we have enough stuff. There is an opportunity through digital experiences and how we live our digital lives to allow retailers to think differently, to create new opportunities. There is going to be some cool stuff that could be done. Whether or not those brands are ready and have the right mindset to do it, I would question. But somebody is going to figure it out and will do very well out of it.
Is there still a huge gap between what the customer wants and what the fashion companies can deliver when it comes to these kinds of experiences? Or are customers not even aware of what they could be having?
I think customers are really accepting of experimentation, a lot more so than fashion brands. And I think we live our lives in kind of a state of perpetual beta testing. Like we're updating our phones every single day. Nothing is perfect. And yet fashion brands seem to kind of want to packet everything into a sense of perfection and deliver you that singular message. They can be a lot more experimental, and those experiences can be rough around the edges, particularly if you're working with emerging technologies. And what we do, because we're pushing boundaries a little bit, is kind of challenge that notion of what perfection looks like. But I have to say things have moved a lot. To imagine that there would be fashion brands activating on Roblox is a big step forward, because the aesthetic on Roblox, or Decentraland for that matter, and I look at what Decentraland Fashion Week looked like, not amazing, and certainly not fashion. I think there is a little bit more risk-taking that's beginning to happen, and a realization, I think, that if they don't move, they will be left behind. I think that's what's driving some of those decisions. But from a consumer perspective, I think they're ready. They have always been ready to be experimental. So the gap, I think, exists in where fashion brands are mentally, or within a leadership team, able to take a step towards them. But from a consumer's perspective, if you build something cool or something fun, they'll come.
When you said about fashion companies being afraid and taking the risk, what is the main roadblock?
So one of my colleagues spent a good 18 months interviewing retailers around why they weren't adopting emerging technologies. And fear was the overriding message. And it was a number of areas, but it was everything from the fear of the cost to the fear of getting it wrong. The fear of failure was a big thing, because I think they're moving in areas that they don't really understand. Also, fear of being first was one that, I guess, in where things go wrong. Fear of being second, maybe somebody else does it first, so I'm just not going to do it. But, whatever it was, there were a lot of reasons, but overwhelmingly it was fear. And I think, that speaks to where education needs to play a part, where coaching, mentoring, you need to bring teams. We have to try and work alongside management teams to move them, nudge them in the right direction. But also that's company culture too, isn't it?
I think this is the old age situation of established companies being very scared of taking risks and working on innovation, because they've established themselves. There's a certain image, there's a certain way that they're viewed, and it's a big risk to give all of that up, which is why when you have the smaller businesses, or those who have less to lose, because what do they have to lose in the first place, that new and interesting ideas take place, especially during times of crisis. So what advice would you give to these young guys and girls, startups who are innovating within the space, specifically within the fashion industry? What advice would you give them?
My advice would be just to keep experimenting and to do it yourself. Don't wait for the industry. I can't.
I'll be waiting a long time.
We used to worry a lot about kind of working with luxury brands, and felt that it would always kind of validate what we were doing if a luxury brand wanted to work with us. But I think I've got to that point of confidence in the work that we're delivering that actually we don't need them. We've had 9 years of building this. Our reputation is at a point where I don't need to work alongside luxury brands to validate our work. I know the work is important. We can demonstrate that through the technology and through the impact it's having through the university and the businesses that are coming out of the university, for the brands that are now knocking on the door looking for advice and leadership in that space. Yeah, don't wait for anybody. Keep doing what you're doing. It's really clear to see that the technologies around 3D and immersive are going to radically shift consumer experience, the type of product we create and the type of products we consume. Nobody needs to wait for a brand to move on that. Go do it yourself.
Thank you, Matthew. Really a pleasure to have you, and to listen to your insights and to learn from you, and to get a glimpse of what it's like being within that space. So thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Anatomy of a Leader. What did you discover in this episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next week.